And the title of your presentation, Universalism in Film, remarks based on the 2023 film Chłopi, the Peasants, directed by Dorota, Kobiela, and Hugh Welchman. Apologize if I pronounce the names correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for such a nice introduction, and welcome to everybody. I hope the small lecture I've prepared would be of your interest. I'd like to talk about something more, let's say, important, because not the case, not the movie is important in my lecture. Important is the problem. The problem is universal language in art in our times, and that directly goes to the title of the Congress, Humanity and Humanism. It has been stated several times that the movie, the cinema, became one of the most important art in our world. Films are everywhere. People are walking to the cinema. They are, of course, very different movies. At the moment, there are different places you can see different movies. Majority of them, of course, it's the Hollywood and Indian production concerning the pop film, and in many countries there are also movies which are a little bit more ambitious, more really high art development. So that is something I'd like to tell you about. As I said, universalism in film, or on the basis of film, Chłopi, the Peasants. The film was done and shown for the first time in 2023, so it's quite fresh. And that was the Polish movie for Oscar prize. Unfortunately, it didn't get the Oscar. Maybe in other places it will be something more important. Okay, let's start from the beginning, and why is it so important, and why one Polish movie can be an example of something universal. So I'd like to start with what's going on with this Chłopi, with this peasant, because the story is more than 100 years at the moment. Then I will try to say something about the plot, about the novel, because the movie was based on the novel. Then I remind to you that we are using in the, let's say, mass culture, but we can say also popular culture, about something what we call the cultural cliches. And the music for these cliches is something very important, because it gives a very easy and very useful element, understood worldwide. And then we come back to the movie. What is unusual with the movie, and what is unusual with the music of this movie, and why we can call this music universal. So let's start. Władysław Stanisław Raymond was a Polish novel writer, not very popular worldwide, and he wrote several novels. Probably you've never seen any of them, but the first very important that also filmed, it was Ziemia Obiecana, the Promised Land. It was the picture of late 19th century city of Łódź, a city which was full of different national characters, I mean Jewish, German, Polish, and Armenian, because Armenian was a very important group in Łódź, also Russian, of course, because there was a time that Poland as a country didn't exist. And in this movie, he showed something what was very cruel, the cruel early capitalist time in a Polish version. the story you can read. I don't want to tell the story, but there were three friends: Paul, Karol Borowiecki, a Polish guy, Moritz Welt, who was Jewish, and Max Baum, who was German. And they were just friends, but their friendship was starting point for the passionate story telling how the watch was developed. Why watch? Because that was a symbol of the new era. And Raymond started to picture this symbol of the new era very step by step. There was a very good movie on this, but I don't want to talk about this one. The Chłopi was the second one, second novel written by Stanisław Raymond, among many others, of course. And that is, as I said, a broad panorama of the people and nature in a small village somewhere in central Poland. The funny story of this is that this village, Lipce, exists. The problem is that this Lipce, who exists in real in Poland, are not exactly the same village which is portrayed in his novel. So starting from the very beginning, Raymond was not writing about particular small village. He was writing about a village which was a symbol of villageness, of small odds, typical for Poland, for Czech, for Slovakia, for Eastern Germany. There was a group of people connected together, friends, not always friends. There was, of course, a priest. There was, of course, a blacksmith, and many other people who have been living together. And they were a community. And Raymond wrote a great realistic novel, but with a symbolic understanding, symbolic meaning of this place. He wrote it, and for many years nobody cares about this novel until he received the Nobel Prize. But the question is why he received a Nobel Prize in literature. Actually, he received it in 1924 for a story about the Polish small village. The answer is not easy, but can be very well understood. There's a group of characters. Maciej Boryna, that's the father, that's a very wealthy farmer, and he has son, Antek. The problem is that Antek has a wife, but he also has a passionate love affair with somebody else, Jagna. And the Jagna is once again a lady who was promised to Maciej, so to the older guy for being wife. So we have the conflict. We have a conflict between the father and son, between the son and the girl, between the girl who should be a wife, and so on and so on. And it's written on the basis of, let's say, symbolic situation, because this Lipce, it's not a Lipce, as I said before, a small village in the city. It's a small village, a symbol of villages. And of course, the time is also symbolic. Maybe you know that in rural cultures, Advent was described many times by different philosophers and aesthetics, the time is not linear. It's not going from past to the future. No, it's going like a circle because it's connected with 4 seasons. It starts with springtime, then it develops and so on, and has the autumn time for the most important part of the agrarian year, and then it's dying during the winter time. And again, starting on springtime. And Raymond wrote, as I said, 3 in 1. It was, on one hand, realistic novel, but it was also the peasant epic and timeless myth, and there was also a human and natural life altogether. And probably that was the case why the jury of the Svenska Akademien proclaim Chłopi by Raymond as the winner of the Nobel Prize in 1924. Exactly, it was awarded for the most outstanding work of an idealistic tendency. And this idealistic tendency showed that was not really realistic. It looks like a realistic, but it's not. And of course, there is a plot connected with policy, with politics. That's also a problem of the conflict between the one person and the whole community of the village, and so on and so on. I will not describe the whole story. If you want, the novel was translated in many languages, and probably you can easily find it. And now let's leave Raymond and his Chłopi ahead, and let's start with the language of cultural cliches, as I said before. So what are cultural cliches? They are stereotypes. They are kind of beliefs, but beliefs who are over generalized. So they are very often inaccurate. Now, for example, every Pole is drinking, yeah? It's not right. I'm not a drinker, for example, I'm Polish. But there are also other things. Every German is very strict. No, I know many Germans who are completely not strict, and so on and so on. This could be also cliches not about the specific groups or national groups, but also about ethnics, about the culture. For example, there is a culture connected with something. Now, everybody knows the stereotype that the Central African cultures are not connected with understanding of time because these people live only the common day. It's not right. There are many people from Central Africa who completely other way think. So that is a cliche. In films, cliches are used very often, starting from the beginning of cinema, to show very simply and very fast something you want to declare. For example, if you put in the contemporary film somebody who is dressed like a god, so we understand that is a god culture. If you are somebody dressed like punk, immediately you understand he or she is a punk, even if she or he is not a punk, but also it's just decorated like. And that also concerns music. And that's not only connected with the cinema, it's connected with many elements of art which are more or less popular. The understanding of popular stories in the second half of the 19th century, that was opera, or the more comedian version of opera, operetta. And for example, in operetta, very often you have the action not in Europe, not in the realistic world, but somewhere. One of the most famous is Das Land des Lächelns, Land of the Smile in English, which is for European China. Of course, it's not China. The Chinese would ask immediately, which China, which region, which place. It's not. It's a cliche. It's understanding. And how do we show it's a China? It's very easy. It's enough to show 2 or 3 notes, falling fifths, empty fifths, and that's China immediately. also in the great opera, including the greatest opera of the 19th century, you have exactly the same. If you say to Chinesian that Madame Butterfly is full of Chinesian music, he would die of laughing, because for Chinesian it's not Chinesian music, not at all. For European, in this masterpiece, there are many elements of Chinesian music. Which Chinesian music? This one which we have in our heads, with our understanding of Chinesian music, and so on, and so on. These cliches are used in music for everywhere and from long time. One of the most famous example, there is a bagpipe bourdon. This typical for bagpipe as an instrument. By the way, if you are watching or reading information about different typical instruments for different nations, you are always finding bagpipe. And always it's said that the bagpipe is a typical national instrument in Scotland, in Austria, in Poland, in Romania, and so on and so on. In Italy, of course, because ethnographers know that you must ask which bagpipe it's typical for. And there are different bagpipes in Spanish culture. They are different in North Italian, and of course different are in Scotland. But this bourdon, this characteristic bourdon, is understood or perceived as the folk music. And starting in the early 17th century, you have many pieces of music with this bourdon, and it means that it has something to do with the folk music, for example, in dancing music. Also, flute or oboe are treated many, many times and as an instruments connected with shepherds culture. So every time you want to say something or about somebody, that he or she is shepherd, even if you are talking about idealistic shepherd in Arcadia, immediately composer uses flute or oboe. So these are cliches, and the contemporary movie uses this worldwide and very, very often. Do you listen the sound? Is everything okay?
Yes,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the example, a few bars of the Land of Smiles. And we know that that is China. Why? Neither music nor costumes are Chinese, but we understand they are Chinese. So that is very, very typical. That's not movie, that is operetta.
Це mnie trochę mdliło. So what have you got?
Everybody knows that it's in China. Why? No, because we have these several notes, bang, 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 and immediately every European knows that is China. By the way, that is a movie which is a great comedy, Johnny English, describing stereotypes, not only musical stereotypes. It's a stereotype of the agent, stereotype of a killer, stereotype of a struggle between the good and bad, and so on and so on and so on. And the last example. The last example would be a little bit longer, will be an example of the great epopeia written by Tolkien and movie directed by Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings. In the Lord of the Rings, every nationality, every tribe which appears in the movie has its own music, its own culture. I will show you the example of the Hobbit culture, which are described by Tolkien and by Shaw, the composer, as the elements of the music of Welsh.
It's wonderful to see you, Gandalf.
Je ne sais qu'un monsieur Uncle Dilbertus.
So how is the old rascal? I hear it's going to be a party of special magnificence.
You know Bilbo. He's got the whole place in an uproar.
Well, that should please him.
Half the Shire
Sorry, something wrong with volume.
turning up anyway.
And so life in the Shire goes on, very much as it has this past age, full of its own comings and goings.
Once
Change
normal.
comes slowly, if it comes at all. For things are made to endure in the Shire, passing from one generation to the next. There's always been a Baggins living here under the hill in Bag End. And there always will be.
Lovely to see you. Welcome. Go on, Sam. Ask Rosie for a dance. I think I'll just have another ale. No, you don't. Go on.
And the stream that flows from hill to plain, better than rain or rippling brook. There's a mug of beer inside this tub.
As you could see, there were four elements, typical elements of the rural cultures according to Tolkien. So once again, there were cliches. The first one was a very simple theme, the main theme of Hobbiton. The second, there was an example of the typical folk instrument, especially flute. The third, there was a dancing party with the typical folk instruments, again, including get bucket. That's a very popular and very primitive instrument used in many, many countries. Also in Welsh, also in Poland, for example. And the fourth are the style, as I written, of the songs, drinking songs, sung in pubs, for example, or in other places where people join together just to have a good time. And they're all cliches. They are showing something which is understood globally, but not always it's really connected with particular culture. In this case, that's very obvious because none of us could be in Hobbiton. Maybe that's because it does not exist except of imaginary of Tolkien and his followers. So that is typical how we are creating the cultural cliches, musical cliches, costume cliches in movie, in contemporary movie. Okay, let's come back to Chłopi and movie. The movie version of Chłopi was done in Poland twice. The first version from 1973 was very, of course, popular in Poland, but it was popular only in Poland because it was a typical understanding of how to make the novel a film. I mean, to do it one-to-one. If it's written the blue dress, it must be a blue dress. If it's the folk, it must be a folk. If it's a dance, it's a dance. It's a original ensemble, musical ensemble, and so on and so on. So it was a more or less a realistic culture of 19th century. Of course, it was not realistic. It was idealistic. Everybody who knows the rural culture knows that dresses are never so white, never so clean, for example. So it was a colorful picture of the village community, but not good enough to acquire international recognition. The new version of 2023 was directed by Dorota, Kobiela and Hugh Welchman. It's a completely different world, completely different understanding what to do with the Nobel Prize Award novel of 1924. First, we must understand that was attached a completely new technique which was checked before on other movie about Vincent van Gogh, so-called painted animation technique. I will explain in a moment how it's going on. As you see on the illustration, that looks like a picture, like painted picture. Whole movie looks like it to be painted by hand. The second, the directors have been concentrating on the perennial themes of love, hatred, sacrifice, conflicts between the blood ties and cultural customs, because these conflicts are really global. And if we take the village in Poland or the village in, I don't know, New Zealand, we will find exactly the same conflicts, the conflicts of a single person and community, the conflict between a woman, one or two protagonists. Also, the film seeks to underpin how to make universality versus the formal universality, because we can, of course, do something what is typical for theater. We had today the presentation about the Shakespearean understanding in theater. Very often we are giving to Shakespeare characters contemporary costume, and we say, okay, that's the story typical for contemporary world. Yes, of course it is, because Shakespeare was a genius and we can understand his dramas like this. But it's much more difficult to film something in the characters, in the costumes, in the reality, more or less of the time which was depicted, and to make it universal. This film was also universal because it brings to life over 30 different paintings of greatest, or one of the greatest European artists, including Bruegel, Vermeer, Van Gogh, Millet, and Polish ones, of course, like Chełmoński, Wyczółkowski, Fałat, or Ruszczyk. It was also universal because the team who was doing this film, it was the team of over 100 artists from different countries, from Balkan countries, from Lithuania, from Poland, of course, from Slovak, from Ukraine. So many different artists have been asked to paint these pictures, which later on were moved with the techniques of the contemporary movie. So they produced over almost 2,000 frames, hand by hand, frame by frame. And then afterwards, it was stretched into the 14,000 frames with computer development. So we can summarize that this movie is really a pictorial project which results through Gesamtkunstwerk for the 21st century. A year ago, I was talking about the Gesamtkunstwerk of our time, and that is a movie. So I repeat, that's a very, very good realization of the aesthetical idea of the early 19th century philosophers of aesthetics. Maybe I stopped for a moment to tell what you see. You see the original picture and a frame from the movie. Upper part, it's original picture, and you have the title and the name of the artist who has painted this. And downstairs you have a frame from the movie, and also the name, for example, here Marina Boyko, of the artist who was repainted the original paint for use of movie. Okay, let's go on. Okay, and so on. The music, by the way, is also a music of from this movie. And now another movie which shows the technique, let's say step by step. On the right hand on the picture, you will see the same fragment, a few seconds of movie. Firstly, the picture, which was the basic picture for these few seconds, then different stages. So repainted picture, and also what was done by actors filmed on a green box technique. Finally, these repainted pictures been used for computer generated sequence of pictures. So it is really the universal understanding of fine arts, because we are putting together different arts. We are putting together cinema technique, painting technique, copyist technique, and the movie as the telling the story with picture. Have a look. let's summarize this first information. The movie of 2023 is really an use the very special technique because the first it served as a visual tribute to the pictures of the beginning of 20th century. This period of art history in Poland is called Young Poland, but we had only Young Österreich, we had Young Italy. There was a typical that this time was a fascination by folk, and that was something at the same time like a Jugendstil. So that is a time which was depicted in the novel by Raymond. The second, the movie enhances emotional depth, because if we are looking at a picture in a gallery, usually we are thinking, what does character was thinking about? What was his idea, and so on. So we are thinking about emotions. That's the difference between the portrait, painted portrait, and the photo made with the smartphone. The portrait shows the character. The photo makes only the picture. So in this movie, we tried, or not we, directors tried to universalize the emotions. The third, of course, that was the idea of the directors after this first movie about the Vincent van Gogh. The title was Loving Vincent. They wanted to apply the same technique, the same process for a more difficult story, which was the story of the peasants. And the fourth element I called achieving timelessness. You of course know that every picture usually has a datum somewhere and a time. So it's exactly the situation of 3rd March of 2002 at 1745. With painted picture, with something we have in galleries. We have a situation in which we say, oh, that is a typical countryside of the late 18th century. Or that is a typical picture connected with the sea for English artists of the 19th century or 17th century. So the idea of the movie was to realize something what Raymond could not realize because he had no technical meaning, technical possibility to do it, universal technically of movie, of the cinema, contrary to the realistic nature of a film as the filming only the objects, as only demonstration of the object. The second level of universalism of this movie was dance. There are many fragments of the movie where we are dancing. Dance is something very typical for village culture. People are dancing. There are many situations that we are dancing. We are dancing during the wedding. We are dancing every day in pub to have a good time. We are dancing also after having corn in our home to be very happy. We are dancing during Christmas time. This Christmas dance was something very special. It took several days. And that is, let's say, ethnographic story, how we are dancing, how we are dressed. And of course, the choreographers know very exactly what are the dancing elements typical for second half of the 19th century. In the movie, it's made, we can say, it's made wrong. There are many mistakes. If you ask a choreographer, they would say, no, it's impossible. This dance, it couldn't be danced like this in the time of the novel. Well, let's say with the first fragment. You will see in a moment, so I will just say what's necessary to know. At the very beginning, the characters shouting, let's play Volta. I asked several choreographers, what is Volta? Because in any handbook of the Polish folk dances, there is no Volta dance. Volta, of course, exists in music, mostly Italian because it's Italian world, and that's a typical dance also, but 16th century and not Polish. And it's nothing to do with the music we will hear during this dancing. So this Volta, it's not a particular Polish dance. It's a dancing as the symbolic element of the village culture. The second, there will be a dance between Jagna and Antek. They are lovers, but Antek has a wife, so that's problem. He shouldn't dance like this with the other girl, and the girl is a fiancée of his father. Now that makes a situation much more complicated, but it's a violation of the cultural canon. It's impossible. It was forbidden. Then there's a very important element of every wedding ceremony when the bride is unbraiding. Not unbraiding, that's a mistake, sorry. Braiding. This L should not be here. Completely different word, sorry. So unbraiding the hair braid, it's possible during this ceremony, and that is the symbolic moment when the girl becomes woman. It's impossible to do it in dance, especially when the dance is in public place. So once again, it's a break. It's a violation of the canon. The fourth, passionate dance. Folk dance has different figures, and there are some figures which are well known, and the choreographers know very exactly which figures are typical for particular dances. But in this dance, you will see there are figures which were possible after the revolution of dance in the 1920s, 1930s, not earlier. It were prohibited, especially in public places. The next one, that will be the figure when the Jagna and winding legs with his partner's body. No, that is a fragment, that is typical for ballet, artistic ballet, and the second half of the 20th century. Before it was completely impossible. I would say that what we see now, it would be a folkloric dirty dancing. This dirty dancing, you remember the very famous dancing. They've been dancing. What's the problem with? That was a breaking the cultural canons, of course, American canons of dancing. For girl who was completely situated in different level of the social hierarchy. Here we have the same situation, but with different characters. Have a look.
Wolę Volta, chłopacy! Ostro!
hope that you understand now why I'm saying about the universal understanding of this dance. Everybody understands the passion. Everybody understands the love. Everybody understands the breaking of social canons in this fragment. Of course, and they are all astonished because the Maciej Boryna, so the father, is coming. Bright. So the story is a little bit difficult. The other example from the same movie would be the example of other dance. That would be the mazurka, but the very formal mazurka dance during the wedding ceremony. And it starts very official. It's the dance danced with the figures connected with mazurka between the bride and bride. But on its starting point is like this. Then, as you will see, there will be the changing of dancers, changing of partners, and every partner treat Yagna as the object of passionate. That's problem because it's a wedding. Try to understand the common situation and the common weddings now, and try to imagine a bride dancing like this with several different partners. So we see that Yagna loses awareness of the situation. He doesn't know exactly what's going on. We can call it even the partial loss of consciousness. So as we are looking at this fragment, we understand it's depicted as a symbolic group rape, that she is not dancing. The story symbolically shows something completely different. And let's come to music. Musical accompaniment for this dance, it's not Polish mazurka. For Poles, it's quite obvious. It started maybe like mazurka, but it doesn't sound like mazurka. The ensemble sounds mostly like a Balkan ensembles, typical for pop music. But the clarinet, which is the first time here shown as a solo instrument, sounds like klezmer music. Of course, there were Jews in a Polish village in the 19th century, but not in this fragment. The trumpet, it was a very rare instrument for folk in Poland here, but there was very typical for brass ensembles in Balkan once again. And listen to the bass, to the rhythm. The rhythm is going ahead and ahead and ahead and ahead, like a shamanic rhythm. So listen to percussion. Percussion is a typical percussion for waltz, not for mazurka. Mazurka and waltz are for 3/4 metr, of course, yes. But the typical rhythm for mazurka is 8/8 crotch, yeah. Typical for waltz is ta-ta, first accent and then two smaller notes, and we hear this waltz rhythm. So it's combined totally. So we have a mixture of styles, especially when we listen to this distorted bass. And that proves that the music is neither Polish, it's even not European. That's more universal folk, whatever it means. I understand that somebody who is staying, I don't know, in Chicago, understand, oh, that is typical folk. Maybe it is typical folk, but what folk? The ethnographer would say it's non-folk. It's a popular version of the cliché of folk in popular culture. Have a look. Okay, so last point, music. According to almost everybody who was writing about this music, the film's strongest point is soundtrack. The music creators, we must name Łukasz Rostkowski or Luke. His idea was to blend different elements of Polish folk, Balkan folk, Slavic folk, Baltic folklore, early music instrument, music of the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, contemporary elements such as club rhythm, rap, pop music, and what I mentioned before, shamanic rhythm. So finally, we have music which is very, very random, only diegetic. Usually it's non-diegetic, although it looks like a diegetic. So we understand that we have a music of the 19th century. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. And many people who are not specialists would say, oh, that's authentic music. Of course it's not. It's the same like playing authentic African music by Polish folk ensembles, because they use the typical percussion instruments for Africa. So in this movie, I will show you an example of how it works. But before I tell, just a short explanation. Polish folk music is a single voice music. 95–97% of this music does not use any kind of polyphony or diaphony. That you see, that's a map of Poland, and the blue fragments, that is the examples of Lithuanian influence, Belarusian influence music. There are some 2–3 voices choirs, a few Polish songs only, and the southern part, you have the influence of our southern neighbors, so Czech, Slovak especially, for lots so diaphony, choirs. All others it's not. So if you are using multi-voice, polyphonic fragments of the music, it's not Polish. But what is Polish? The Polish would be the song Rozczesała, rozpuściła, a very characteristic point, a song for whole Polish culture, typical song for this very crucial moment of the wedding ceremony, unbraiding ceremony. But the version we would listen sounds like a Lithuanian version mostly. Why? Because it's executed by the women ensemble who are singing, people from different countries, let's say pop folk music. Have a look. So that is the this ocepiny ritual, or wedding cepin or unbriding cepin. So let's listen firstly to the music which is recording of ethnographic finding, just the original music.
Rozczesała, rozpuściła białe włosy. Ostaw mnie, nie dajże mnie, mój tatuniu, od siebie, jakżeż ja cię mój.
And so on. And now let's listen how this music was acquired for the use of movie. Okay, we don't have time to listen to the end of this fragment. You see, it's completely different understanding of this music, different harmony, the polyphony, which brings so many artistic elements to this story, and so on and so on. So it's a very good example how Luke have transcribed original folk music into the music which looks like authentic music in the movie, and basically it's universal folk music. The last example is another song, which was a great music video in Poland for many months. It has a status of the well-established music video. Tańcuj, tańcuj, or called Autumn Dance. This music, it has nothing to do with folk, but has many to do if you are looking for a folk cliche music and the pictures from the movie. So the soundtrack imbues the story with a surreal, comprehensive meaning.
Chodź, bruchetko, wyjdź na wesele czas. Będą tam grały nam skrzypice, będą was. A kto się nie daje, a kto nie napije, tego będę pije, ja tego pomyję. Wesele nowiny, ten co już ten świat. Tańcuj i szalej jak dziki jesienny wiatr. Za miłość raz i dwa, za miłość i kwiat, za miłość wykita.
Okay, summary. Film in 21st century employs a variety of universal codes. Music is one of the most important. Why? Because it's understandable without any language. You don't need to write it. You don't need to translate it. You don't need to transcribe it. The film music, which uses these non-verbal codes, exploits cultural cliches, but is also combining different elements we could never even think that could be combined, such as pop, folk, early music, symphonic music. And the goal of directors of this movie, the creators of this movie, was not only just to show the old novel in a new language, no. It was the idea of creating such an object of art which would be understandable for different age groups, ethnic groups, people from different cultural backgrounds. So to create an universal cultural message. Thank you very much for your time and for your understanding for having 10 minutes too long. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you.
May I?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for this amazing presentation, as usual, and very interesting. Questions from audience? Dear Tante, yes, you're welcome.
First of all, I want to say thank you to Mr. Wojciech. Such an interesting presentation. I have not any question. It's only opinion. And it's very interesting to learn about this writer and your findings about and parallels between film, painting, music is so important and interesting, and it's for me as a person who works with films, it was very interesting to learn about this. And I thought before that I know about Polish cinema, but for me it's new knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The film was it's widely distributed, so you can find it very easily. An English version, or I don't know if it's a Georgian translation, but the English for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Oh, again, dear Professor Ziad.
At first, thank you. It was interesting for me from the musical side and dances and singing songs and so on. By the way, I watched this film several years ago, and I was surprised by demonstrations, such mix of film and animation. Unfortunately, I did not watch the previous film of those authors about Vincent van Gogh, but I remember this oldest film of 1973, the real adaptation, because I was born and raised in the Soviet Union, and sure, I was very interested in socialist countries.
Yeah, it was distributed.
Sure. And I knew many information about Polish cinema, about historical films like Jerzy Hoffman films, Jerzy Kawalerowicz, Andrzej Wajda, and so on. But I was surprised because really when I watched this film, I could not watch it whole film because after 20 or 25 minutes I stopped. Why? Because okay, it is interesting, but it is not full animation and not full film. And what do you see? What do you know about these creators? Are they going to continue this direction or in their film, or maybe they will shoot only animations or only films? What do you think?
Thank you for your opinion, and I understand it can be difficult for somebody who is not. For me, Chłopi, there was a novel I had to read during school education. I had to, so it was obvious. So the old version, by the way, had a music by who was writing, completely stupid, symphonic music in a Hollywood style, a little bit more modern, completely not appropriate for the movie. Talking about the authors, Loving Vincent, it's a simpler subject because it's a biographical film on Vincent van Gogh with pictures of Van Gogh. So it was, let's say, good example of how to make it more popular, maybe. And when you see the Impressionism pictures in gallery in Paris, in Musée d'Orsay, for example, you would like to make these pictures alive. So that's all they did. Then that was the second step, Chłopi, and they are planning to have the third one. I don't remember what, but even the most difficult. So I am afraid that it will be very difficult to do it because it's a huge machinery.
Sure.
And I'm afraid that they have plans, but I don't believe that plans would be.
Yes, it will be very hard work. Very
Oh
hard
yes.
to use animators to
Yep.
at first shot on film, then to use animators.
Just imagine,
Oh my
over
God.
100 painters
Yeah.
working for 4 years.
4. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If any questions from audience, from participants, I just wanted to